I would like to suggest to start off that the contract for the Sunshine Portal not be renewed unless they use the original documents. We just came from a workshop on this. I would suggest Tom Johnson would be a great source for you to consult. He was pointing out that the documents that are on the site are static in that they are flash documents or pictures of documents or PDFs, and you can't really, a person wanting to look at the data can't really compare and contrast anything because it's like a piece of paper. You can't really sort through the data. So if they would use the original documents that the state produces, which are digital, and put those on the site, and include a search engine so you could search for specific.
You know, the last bill that we passed not only put education in there, but we tweaked the contract language, and that's a really good point. We realized that there were some deficiencies there. I read someplace the other day there are over 50,000 contracts at any one time with the state. Mr. Johnson probably knows that number. And the other issue there is there's some things in those contracts that might be proprietary, confidential kinds of information. We have to be very careful when we're just running things through this portal that we're not going to get sued because we put out something there that could have some confidential issues. But I've heard that criticism, that suggestion for improvement on the contracts. We're working on that.
Okay.
And again, we even have some specific language in there on this last bill, and I think that's probably one of the things that excites people more than anything else is this whole contract thing with the state. And we want to get that to a point where it's all in there. You can go to the original documents, and then you can begin, as you can now, to sort it by contractor name or what the contract was for, that sort of thing. So you can drill it down and parse it out any way you would want. So
I was talking about the contract for the people who actually do the site, who've been contracted to create.
Yes, yeah, real-time
That they be required to include digital documents, not
of their
the
contract.
static, of the information they get from New Mexico.
Using the raw data.
Oh, okay.
Raw data.
Well, let me talk about the raw data, and I know we're going to get some comments about that. Again, I'll say it again and again and again. This is a soft rollout. This isn't finished. It's not going to be, it won't be close to being finished till July 1st. The new administration has chosen to take baby steps to get this thing ready. We were hoping that there would be a flood to get this thing done, up and running as quickly as we possibly could with everything in it. It looks like they're going to wait till July 1st before a lot of this. They're going to look at the longer timeline to do this. That's fine. Again, and then July 1st, that's not the end of the expansion of the portal. Over time, I would hope that we could get data dumps of raw data in there. It won't do you any good, or you any good, but there are some people that can take that information and they can morph it and do things with it because they have those skills. And they may be looking for some specific thing that the portal doesn't create. But if they have the raw data, then they could, go off to the races and do whatever they want. I think that's great. We'll get there. We're just not there yet. And it's a valid criticism, and I think that we'll get there. And this is what we need: is this kind of input, ma'am.
I have two questions. The first question is, who was the representative that voted?
Well, it's a matter of public record. I'll tell you. I wouldn't call somebody out, but it is a matter of public record. It was Representative Stapleton here in Albuquerque was the one dissenting vote.
And the second question is somewhat along the lines of the soft rollout, and you were talking about this new governor's administration is wanting to take baby steps. One of the kinds of information that I actually searched for during the legislative session and could not find on the portal was a list of the governor-appointed boards and commissions. All the governor's website has is a list of the board or commission name, but they don't have anything about the individual members of those boards and commissions, and more importantly, their terms.
So like bioinformation and term.
No, for instance, with like the National Hispanic Cultural Center Board of Directors, they have 15 members. So who are the 15 members?
Okay.
And when does each one of their terms end?
Very good. One thing that is in the legislation, in some cases where that information is available, maybe the Hispanic Cultural Center has their own website. one thing we were hoping to do where it's applicable is create some links where you could still go to the portal for everything, but there may be a link that will take you to their website where you can find it. Because the whole purpose of this would be one-stop shop, whether it's directly in the portal or whether it creates a link. But those are appointed positions. That's a really good, that's an excellent point.
And one of the things is Governor Richardson's website used that, list that information.
Yes.
These are the names of board members, this is when their current and Governor Martinez.
That's very good. I appreciate that. That's an excellent suggestion. Ma'am, up in the corner?
Okay, Senator Rue, you sit on the education committee?
Yes, ma'am.
What is your basic philosophy of public education? In your answer, would you comment on charter schools?
Well, I'm a big believer in parental choice for education, and charter schools started out to create parental choice so parents could have an option to the traditional public schools where they could place their children in a charter school, where they could look at the list of charter schools and place their children where they felt they would best function. We've had some problems and some issues with the accountability with charter schools. We passed some legislation this last session that's going to tighten down a little bit on their accountability. The Sunshine Portal does spell out specifically that what we're asking public education will also include information on charters. There are good charter schools and there are bad charter schools. But I support the concept of parents having a choice or an option. If your child is in a failing school, I think the worst thing we could do is condemn that child to continue in that school. And there may be issues. Maybe the school is underperforming. But that kid can't wait 4 or 5 years for them to turn it around. I think the parents ought to have an option to send them someplace else. And charter schools, to some extent, provide that option to parents. And you know, we're trying to slow down the growth of them a little bit and get our arms around the management of those and the accountability. And some of those charter schools are very specific about what they teach, the general curriculum. They have to meet the core requirements, but some of them have, you know, art, technology components to them where kids can go there and really come out with some skill sets or have a head start on their interest in life. I've seen some really good charter schools that I've toured, and I think they serve a purpose. I really do. I hope that answers your question. Huh?
What's the relationship between the Sunshine Portal and the webcasting issues in the Senate and in the House? I know that there's audio, but what Janice Arnold-Jones used to do is, and I know because I work with her, is provide that video and then archive it. There is no facility now for archiving that data. Can you tell me something about that?
Well, you know, the Sunshine Portal is a component of the bigger picture of open government and transparency. And, you know, the portal serves a specific need, and maybe expanding it to include raw data will serve another specific need. You know, the webcasting of committee meetings and, you know, the floor votes and the floor meetings is another component of that. But it's kind of separate. I mean, you know, that is a discussion that we continue to have, but I don't know that it has any relevance per se to the portal. Now, maybe if we start archiving that stuff, that's an idea. Maybe we have a tab in the portal where you can go back and archive some of these recorded meetings. That really troubles me, what you're talking about, because I've tried to go back, and I've wanted, as a legislator, to hear some of the discussion in some of the committees, and it's not archived. And that really is troubling, I think. And again, a lot of this is by design, not accident. But you know, this year, you look at where we were just a couple years ago. Representative Janice Arnold-Jones really kicked the doors open for us. And that woman had a lot of courage. There's pictures of her sitting there with the leadership in the House, getting those cold stares, saying that you'll never get another thing out of here as long as you live. She had the courage to turn that thing on and play that, and they could not stop her. I mean, it took people like that with a lot of courage and leadership to start this process. And it's evolved in just a couple of years. And you guys can go in with your cameras now. You have to ask permission. I have some real problems with that. I was very public about that. But we've come a long way. And now on the Senate floor, you're not looking only at the back of our heads. When we're talking, you can actually see us from the front. And if I'm sitting behind that guy that's talking, you can see if I'm eating peanuts or potato chips or whatever. I got a couple calls on that, but it's important. It's all part of this open government transparency, and we need to continue to move down that continuum.
Would you like to see it archived, this stuff?
You know, I think that's a great idea, and maybe the portal is the place to put it. I mean, that would be a wonderful idea, where you could go back to meetings and dates and begin to see it archived. This whole business about not archiving that is really important.
Thanks.
Senator, I think that you and I have talked before about some of the issues with the beta site, and I also think that the public's very willing to give time to, get it in place by, the original plan launch date, and it has a great deal of flexibility in watching it expand over time. Are you concerned at all, though, about issues of hiding in plain sight? The website says that it's designed by real-time sites, but when you look for the contract for real-time sites, it is not online. And for members of the public, unless they know the person operating real-time sites is under a different name, like SKS LLC, they'll never find that contract online. Does that concern you, that the operator of and the designer of the website's doing that? One, two, how will that be overcome with other vendors that you may not know that they're operating under NBI or nothing but initials?
Well, to that point, whether you use the acronym for your name or whatever, that's a really good point. And I think that that's probably easily resolved by requiring that any mention of contractors or anything be by their corporate, however they're registered.
But you've been
as a
to the
corporate entity.
PRC's website and have seen LLCs, and to find members of a board, you can build corporate mazes to hide everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so how are you going to put sunlight on the maze of corporate structures as it comes down to contracts that are entered in to the database by name?
Well, like I say, I think you could go back to how they file their corporate papers. I mean, you could require them to use that name. Now, there's people that can game anything, I suppose, and over time we'll figure out a better way to stop that. But what guys like you, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way, Peter, but you folks that want this other data, that's all well and good. And you guys can get that data, or hopefully we'll have it available to you at some point, where you guys can do all your forensic stuff and can bleed all these things out, write stories, letters to the editor and all that. But I think we're talking about two different things right now. And there's no conspiracy with this vendor. I don't know why we keep coming back to that. Real-time sites is real-time sites. Now, if they use their acronym, I'll talk to them about it. I'll get it changed. I'll get them to put their contract, I thought their contract was up because when we had our soft rollout, Secretary of the Department of Information Technologies, Mackey, pulled that contract up so people could see what was paid
Under
for it. Now,
SKS.
there's the amount. There isn't the original document. But this is what we'll get to. And I don't know, there's this thing about, the very first thing we did was have a vendor create it. Now all of a sudden we're creating a boogeyman here and some conspiracy thing. I have real issues with that. That was not the intent. I was involved in this thing from day one. So I don't know what you guys are looking for, but this was done very well. It's nationally recognized, and these people aren't hiding it.
That name and that number does not come up, sir.
Well, then I'll fix it, or I'll have somebody change the name on it. This isn't a conspiracy, and I don't know why we keep getting hung up on that. And if that's a problem for you,
Because
I'll
the
go back
portal
and
is supposed to be emitting sunlight
soft
and not being a
rollout.
black hole.
Soft rollout. It isn't even required to be up and running till July 1st. So I appreciate your comments because that's what we're trying to get. And I get it. You and I have talked about this weeks before, and I'll work on that. But I'm not going to keep beating this horse. We'll get it fixed. This is a soft rollout. It's not required to even be up and running till July 1st. Between now and then, hopefully we can fix some of these things. And if you'll give us your criticisms in writing, be very specific about what it is, we'll work on it. This isn't a static event. I hope everybody will understand that. Mr. Johnson.
Sort of related to Peter's question, if this is supposed to be a sunshine portal of government documents, why then do we have it registered as a .com where the site is held by these guys here in Albuquerque and it's posted on servers in Scottsdale, Arizona?
I don't know, but I'll find out. And if we get it to .gov, by golly, we'll do it, and we'll sure take care of that. They had a contract to set this thing up, and I don't know, I'm not a technical guy. I can't go where you and Peter can go on this stuff, but I'll find out.
I mean, we've hired vendors before to work on contracts within a government agency.
And this company does the Department of Transportation's website, they do several others within the
Can
city.
I help you
That's
out?
right, and so why is it moving out? I mean, this is sort of like, sending Blackwater to
Can-
one operation.
Can I help you out real quick?
Blackwater? No, listen, this is not, there's no conspiracy with this website. I don't know what the issue here is. If it's a .com instead of a .gov, I'll try to find out why that is, and if it's something that can be changed or should be changed, we will. If we put in real-time sites and not RTS or whatever it is, if that's giving you heartburn, we'll change that. I'll fix it. Thank you for the input, but I'm not gonna sit here and create this conspiracy thing with you guys.
Senator, can I
Because
help
I've
you
talked to you
out?
about it, I've talked to you about
Can
it.
I help you out real quick? You have to have, a contract that's in place to get and make an application for a .gov, because I have the nmgov.tv, and we looked into that. You as a commercial vendor, or me, cannot get a .gov for a soft rollout. They won't give it to you. It has to be the date that it's supposed to implement. That governmental agency has to submit a letter to the ICANN, the People Registry,
Yeah.
for the internet to get it. So if they're doing, I can tell you my experience, in order to do something like a soft rollout, they only can do under the abilities that they have, which is a commercial. So now they may be able to do it in July, but I'm just saying technically they're not allowed to have the .gov right now.
No, but you could do a site and then start to build out from that initial site.
Yeah, I'm just saying they can't legally do it. They won't let them do the .gov.
Well, I think we're in a transition here. I mean, real-time sites had the contract.
Yeah,
And this vendor worked on NVD.gov
yeah,
from day one.
right. But that has to be the date of the actual contract.
Well, I don't know what their arrangements were with the then Secretary of the Department of Information Technologies, and he's gone, so I don't know what they arranged. I think this is a transition process. They had the contract to set it up. They have a short-term contract to maintain it. I doubt that it would remain in that form. At some point, it's gonna be taken over by Do It. We had a conversation during the session where all of this will be handed over to them after they've been trained and they know some of the things they need to know to do it. I can assure you that there's no conspiracy. This isn't Blackwater, and I appreciate the constructive criticism and suggestions. And this is the whole purpose of this soft rollout, was to get this feedback. Sir, in the white shirt.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for being a leader in these issues. And you may have mentioned it, and I might have missed it, about the school budget information. Are contractor information going to be listed? And I ask that because I would guarantee you that it is. Folks will see there are a lot of private entities making a lot of money off of the public schools that people aren't aware of because they're contracting with each district.
Good point. Yes, everything that's required of any other state agency or department will be required of education, and then there were a few other things specific to education that were also called out. The other thing that interested me about education, we're in tough economic budget times. APS is feeling the pinch, as are the other large school districts. Come to find out, a lot of these school districts own a lot of property. And that's why in this legislation, I asked for an inventory, a regular inventory of their real property. They own property all over the place. You'd be amazed. That's well and good, but it's something that we should be looking at in the bigger picture of school budgets and what we can afford and what we can't. Sir?
You mentioned that the contract, the Sunshine Portal, is very specific as how things are done in our discussion of what kind of documents you're supposed to do. I think that's one reason why, if we had the actual contract posted on the internet, you could get more public input as to how to improve it. Secondly, if there were a specific click-on spot on that website for people to directly submit their comments about it,
Mm-hmm.
it'd be extremely efficient as far as getting public input for improvement.
To kind of get a track of what other people are thinking? Is that what
The
you're asking?
public, yeah.
Okay.
People will read something, they come up with an idea, oh, I've got
Okay.
a better idea for me.
That's a good point, because sometimes you'll read somebody else's
Also
idea and you can
make the
build on
point
it.
There's no search button on that thing for direct access to stuff. Now, what I want to suggest, and I want to put two people on the spot here, and they're both here, and I haven't spoken to them personally about this, but I would suggest that you get together with Tim Johnson to discuss the mechanics of the site and how it can be improved.
Oh, we're sitting down with everybody. I've talked with,
Well, Tim has made some very,
Tom,
Tom has made some very constructive suggestions.
Except
And
for
I think
black
you guys,
line.
well, the two of you can
Absolutely.
work out how best to deal with it.
Well, I
Second-
talked to Mr. St. Cyr about it, and
Yeah.
Ms. Johnson hasn't reached out to me yet, but I'd be willing to sit down with him and have any discussions about all this.
The other thing is, you mentioned legislation to improve the contract. It would really be advantageous if you could set up means by which the methodology of the Sunshine Portal could be more flexibly improved, rather than having to rewrite the contract and get legislation to rewrite that contract every time some problem arises.
You mean the contract for the site?
Yeah, yeah. You were saying it's done in a certain way and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. If we had a legislative committee that controlled the site, and just said, okay, now we're not gonna do it that way anymore, we're gonna do it this way, and here's what, legislation is only necessary to cover the expense of the change.
A good point. I suspect that real-time sites is going to be out of this thing very soon. I think that the Department of Information Technologies will take it over here.
Great.
That's kind of the sense I got.
people want to do that.
So they'll be out of it. I mean, they were contracted to set it up. We knew we'd have a transition with administration, so I think they got a contract in the short term to maintain it through this rollout period. And what I was gleaning from the new Secretary of the Department of Information Technologies is the vendors will be out of this thing, and you know, the state will have control of it. But you make another really good point, and something I thought about a little bit too. We should have some kind of an oversight committee, I think.
Sure.
You know, and that's a really good idea, because the question I've had is, well, who's really responsible for this? I mean, the Secretary of the Department of Information Technologies is responsible for the mechanics and the architecture, but who's really responsible for the content of it? And I think that we need to address that, and I think that, you know, perhaps some kind of an oversight committee or board or something that, you know, brings lay people in, public people that are active in their communities. Probably prefer to keep the legislators out of it. I don't know. We'd have to have a chat about that. But I think that's an excellent idea. I think there needs to be that kind of oversight. Because again, this thing is, it's going to be ongoing. What's in it? What's not in it? And we need to be able to move quickly on those ideas and get them implemented. Yeah, Steve.
Could you give us the address to the site one more time, how to
Yes.
get to this?
It's www.sunshineportalnm.com. Hopefully soon to be .gov.
You know, I don't care if it's .gov or .bs. I think it's wonderful what you're doing, and I think it's a fabulous step forward for the state, so I applaud you for that.
Being a bipartisan issue, have you had any more success with this administration about getting information about Medicaid contracts than you did with the last one? I know the last administration vetoed a couple of bills that the League of Women Voters supported, and I think the House voted for almost unanimously. Any indication from this administration they're going to be more open with information about it?
Well, I know that they're very concerned about some of the confidentiality issues of it. That was the reason or excuse that, you know, we had gotten before, that there were some, you know, some proprietary information that there were some questions about legally whether that could be divulged or in what form would it be divulged. I don't have a sense where the administration is going to come down on that. I mean, I know they don't want to step into a legal minefield on it. You know, the thing that's nice about a new administration, you hope, is that, and it's the same with new legislators, you have nothing to fear. You got nothing to hide. And if things can be done, you know, reasonably, and there's no legal issues with it, I think that's a lot of it. Because I remember sitting in all those committee meetings, listening to then Secretary of Health and Human Services, that, you know, there's some real, if you just take all this stuff out, there's some real confidential information here. There were some other issues that weren't discussed, but there were some other reasons I suspect that, you know.
But again, the question of sunshine versus
Yeah.
darkness.
Well,
And I think that was a position, I know that the bill passed pretty overwhelmingly in both the Senate and the House, because I know the LFC is very frustrated with not having the information to make a decision.
I read something about that just the other day, and I wish I could be specific, but gave me a little bit of pause. And to answer your question, I'm not so sure that this administration was just going to carte blanche sign that. And I can't be specific, but I remember something I read struck me that there may be some issues there.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
sir?
On the school budget, I got to thinking, you know, it's 1.25 billion or whatever it is, and they're concerned, yeah, in Albuquerque, I'm talking about the Albuquerque Public Schools. And they're concerned that, that they can't find any place to cut their budget. Is it a legislative function to request a forensic audit to find out just where their money is and the property they have, all those kinds of things? Is that the kind of, can a forensic inspection of the budget be paid for by the state, or who would do that?
Well, that's a really good question.
Requested first and then.
When I first got up to the legislature, Representative Jimmy Hall is on House Education. He's been there for a while, so he understood a lot of these things I was trying to learn. A really good point about audits, there are audits and then there are forensic audits. The issue we had with the Hamas School District had just passed an audit and got a clear bill of health. And then somebody dropped a dime on the administrator, and they came to realize that there was a person there that stole $3 million from the Hamas School District. They just passed an audit. Because, you know, the person that was stealing was the person doing the books.
Sure.
So, you know, so that's a good point. Yeah, there's the forensic audits. One thing we did do in the session is we, see if I can remember the details. We took some people from one of the other departments and created 3 new audit positions for Hector Balderas, the state auditor. And he was going to use those people to do more audits and more extensive audits of the school districts throughout the states. I can't remember the specifics, but it gets back to your concern. I'm a big believer in audits, and we realize we need to do much more. And in fact, I heard on the news the other day that Hector Balderas, to his credit, and I think he does a fine job as our state auditor, came down on one of the Las Vegas school districts. And I put them on alert. So there's some technical term there, meaning, hey, we're going to watch you real, real close, because there's some things here that don't really make sense. He's doing the best he can with limited resources, and many of us have pushed to give him more. One of the agencies that could stand to be funded better would be the auditor, state auditor, because they find some of these things. And we realize that, but you know, we're trying to.
This is such a big district and so much money.
Well, here's the numbers.
You
You know,
don't know.
40% of the state's budget of 5.2 billion, 5.3, is public education, K through 12. 11% of the state budget is Albuquerque public school systems. 11%. And there's not nearly the transparency and openness and accountability within that part of our tax dollar pool as there is now with some of the other agencies and departments. And there's been a lot of pushback on this 327 that brought the schools in. I had a lot of pushback from some superintendents. They were concerned about an increased workload. They had valid concerns and questions, and I think we resolved most of those. There are some other people in certain organizations that had some real issues with it. So it's never easy. Yeah, this was a glaring omission from the portal. And then, you know, this thing, we take little steps. We're going to come back and try to get higher ed in there next year. Higher ed needs to be in there. You know, that's another, what is it, Peter, 10, 15%, 10%? You know, higher ed needs to be in there too. So again, we're expanding it, we're changing it, we're morphing it. And when I'm done, Sarah, give me the hook.
Yeah.
Ma'am?
As a citizen lobbyist, it's always very frustrating to get to Santa Fe and try to go to a meeting and find the meeting's been canceled or the agenda didn't change. I'm sure you've heard this a million times. So my question really is there any way to, is there any will of the legislature to deal with that issue? Is anybody out there tweeting, for example, to make the changes?
That's another great point. And we passed some legislation, and maybe somebody can help me, after a couple thousand bills, they all kind of blend together, that required the posting of agendas. Did it get through?
Well,
Oh,
no,
it
it
did not.
didn't. It was waiting for a vote on the Senate floor at the last minute, and it would have made agendas available 72 hours in advance, but the giant loophole is that it doesn't apply to the legislature. They have a special section of the Open Meetings Act because it's you know, people who've been to the legislature, you know, 7 days notice of a meeting, which is what, you know, you should have in an Open Meetings Act, is not realistic. So.
That has been talked about a lot. And, you know, posting of agendas, meetings in advance, and here you go. You know, it makes perfect sense. How could anybody stand in opposition to that? And all of a sudden, you know, there are people that have issues with it. And procedurally, things were shut down, and it didn't get to the floor, didn't get out for a floor vote.
It was on the calendar waiting.
It was on the calendar waiting. That is very, very important. You know, we talk about transparency and open government. That you need to be able to be there to participate and engage in that process. And to the extent that we make it really hard for you because we're not willing to post that stuff up.
All right, well, that's gonna be our last question. Thank you so much to Senator Rue for being here.